Tessa, so I'm at the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic. You just asked for a quick run-through of the Titanic. As many people know, the Titanic was a very luxurious ship that was built in 1912, and when it sent out on its maiden voyage, it had the reputation of being unsinkable. So the White Star Line never actually marketed it as unsinkable, but because of the technology that created, there was bulwarks in the bottom of the ship, and so it was designed in a way that they could be sealed off. So the idea was that if any one of these were breached, then the rest of it could stay afloat. And they were not planning on running into an iceberg, which is what happened. So here in our museum, we like to tell the Halifax side of the story. So when the Titanic started to sink, it was off the it's off the coast of Newfoundland, closest to a place called Cape Race. And so Cape Race would be one of the first places when you're crossing the Atlantic Ocean in 1912. You have no way of really communicating with either shore until you get within view of Cape Race. So when they arrived, hit the iceberg, and unfortunately, all those bulwarks, too many of them were breached, and so she was taking on too much water. So as much as they had hopes that she would be unsinkable, she was not. So the wireless operator aboard the Titanic started calling for help, started calling for SOS, and SOS actually the new distress signal at the time, so they used that one and the older distress signal, calling for help around Cape Race. But unfortunately, since Cape Race was one of the first places where you cross the Atlantic, there's lots of wireless transmissions going through, so a lot of people didn't hear the Titanic. Or when they did hear her calling for help, they figured, well, she's unsinkable, she'll be fine. She was not fine. She was taking on a lot of water, and so eventually the captain did make the decision to evacuate the ship, invited all the passengers and crew to head for the lifeboats. So women and children were loaded aboard the lifeboats first. Sadly, a lot of the lifeboats were actually not filled to capacity. A lot of the crew aboard the Titanic had not received safety training on exactly how to load the lifeboats. So although there were not enough lifeboats on board for the entire 2,200 passengers and crew aboard the Titanic, so many of them sadly went down with the ship. One of the ships that was close to Cape Race that heard the distress signals of the Titanic is the Carpathia. So the Carpathia set out from Cape Race to go help the Titanic. By the time that she arrived at the site, the Titanic had already sunk. So the Carpathia was able to rescue many people from lifeboats. They rescued just over 700 people and brought them safely to Titanic's original destination of New York. So 700 people made it safely to New York. However, out of the 2,200 that were aboard the Titanic, only 700 made it, so tragically many of them died. So the White Star Line, which was the line that created the Titanic, they hired 3 cable ships from Halifax to set out to go to recover the bodies of those who were who didn't make it. So one of the ships, the cable ships that went out, was the Mackay Bennett. So the Mackay Bennett was loaded with, they had a coroner aboard, they brought embalming tools, they brought many coffins, ice, that kind of thing to preserve bodies, and they set out and went and picked up just over 300 bodies from the place that the Titanic sank. So 300 bodies were recovered. Unfortunately, the Mackay Bennett had many coffins, but not 300, so many people had to be buried at sea. Before they were buried at sea, detailed descriptions were made of every body that was pulled from the wreck site. So we have those documents, and we can see exactly the description of everybody who was pulled from the water. One of those being the unknown child of the Titanic. You can see their shoes on display over here. And the crew of the Mackay Bennett was so moved by the sight of such an innocent child in the water, they actually used, sorry, you can head through this way. The crew of the Mackay Bennett also recovered the body of Mr. Astor. So his family, millionaires, had put out a reward for his body, and so the crew of the Mackay Bennett won that award. I think it was around $100,000, and they used some of that money to make a monument to the unknown child, as they were so moved by that. So unfortunately, the Titanic was was a huge tragedy, and while the survivors did not come to Halifax, the dead did. And we have Fairview Cemetery here in Halifax, where eventually many people were buried. Many people were identified through that system of documenting what everyone looked like, what they had on their persons. We were able to identify many bodies, but some people were only buried with a number. So here in Halifax.
So this the Titanic started from New York, came to Halifax.
No, so the Titanic set out from Europe. So
Europe.
Set out from. There's a couple different places that she picked up passengers. So started off from Southampton, picked up more people in Cherbourg, France, and then moved to the last port that she picked up people from was what was then Queenstown, Ireland, now known as Cobb, Ireland. I think I'm pronouncing that right. So that would be the last place that they picked up people in Europe. So the maiden voyage of the Titanic was coming from Europe to New York. So it was never destined to Halifax, from my understanding. It was always destined for New York. But since it went down close to us, Halifax was the best equipped port in the area to send out ships to help. So the Carpathia came from around Cape Grace, closer to Newfoundland. The Cunard Line hired 3 transatlantic cable ships out of Halifax to recover the dead.
Do you have a map of that, how it came and where it sunk?
Yes.
Somewhere here?
Well, I usually have one on me, but I'm sure I can find one in here for you. You know what? Why don't I head around this way?